A good Tuesday morning to you, Central Georgia. I have a lot to cover today in our extended forecast, so we're going to go over what the late afternoon into the evening time does entail and what's in store rather for the next couple of days, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Also having the chance for some storms in the forecast, but the main focus is going to be specifically today. So we have issued a weather impact alert, and it's going to be for strong and severe storms possible. The timing has changed a little bit from this morning. Late this afternoon into the evening, we're taking a look at some of the stuff on the radar where the system currently is over in Mississippi, parts of it already stretching into Alabama, and it does look like it's moving a bit ahead of schedule. So it does look like it could make an entry sometime around the 5 o'clock hour. But the good news is it will get out of here a little bit quicker. It's just going to be quite a messy late afternoon and evening, and probably quite a messy evening commute home from work. If you can, I would advise trying to leave work a little bit earlier and making sure that you do have plans to stay indoors tonight for dinner between 5 and about 9 p.m. or at least when that leading edge of the heaviest rain and the gustiest winds does pass through. Hopefully that's only going to be about 30 minutes or so, and then after that just going to have some lighter and some steadier rain behind that main leading edge. But the leading edge will start to pack a punch with some gusty and damaging winds. We could see winds 40 to 60 miles per hour for certain. That's going to be your strong thunderstorms and getting just into low-end severe thunderstorm criteria. But we could even see some winds in excess of that depending on how severe the thunderstorm is. Large hail also going to be possible. I've been fluctuating with the size all morning long, trying to see if it's going to be small hail. We've gotten different guidelines from different organizations, the SPC and the National Weather Service. I do believe the potential for large hail is going to be there, but at least the potential for some hail falling is going to continue to be a factor that we closely monitor with the hail parameter on our live radar. A brief and a spin up tornado. I've showed you this all morning long and kind of think of these as a ranking system. So this is what we have the most confidence in as far as impacts do go. Large hail kind of going secondary to that. But then a brief spin up tornado. The chances are low. However, they aren't zero, and that's something that we've been given the guidelines of many severe weather systems as of the past month, 2 or 3. We've received our fair share of tornado warnings with some storms, but anytime we have a severe weather risk whatsoever, even if there's not a tornado threat, that's something we're always closely monitoring because we take a look at the winds, try to see how strong those straight line winds are within this line of systems that do kind of roll through, and of course we can get a look at the potential rotation with that. So that's something we'll be on the lookout for. Even though the chances are very low, they still are non-zero, so that's something we have to pay attention to. Here's your satellite and radar picture. This is one thing that I've been monitoring also throughout this morning. We have not received that many breaks in cloud cover. It still is a very gloomy atmosphere, which is going to be a good thing. That's not going to allow temperatures to get as warm as they absolutely could. But we've also seen some residual sprinkle showers, maybe even some clusters of steady rain all throughout the morning hours after that main line of storms and showers did move out. But it does look like cloudy skies are continuing to dominate your forecast, so that's going to inhibit the warm up just a little bit. However, we still are going to warm up somewhere at least in the upper 70s into the low 80s in some areas, maybe down to the south that actually do get a glimpse or two of sunshine. But we're continuing to track what's back over to the west right now. So this is going to be our MCS, that mesoscale convective system that we continue to talk about. This big yellow box that you see is your severe thunderstorm watch. So that extended back into areas of Louisiana and now areas of east and southeast Mississippi. So right now we see 1 lone severe thunderstorm warning, 2 flash flood warnings in those green boxes. We did see some tornado warnings back over in Louisiana a lot earlier this morning. And you may say, well, Alex, this is already into Alabama. This should be in our neck of the woods pretty soon. Well, we are seeing the general motion of the storms along this line going kind of up to the north and the northeast. So this section over here in Alabama is going to continue a northeasterly path. That, if it does hold together, is going to have implications in northern Georgia, not here in central Georgia. The section that we're going to be monitoring is actually way down here. It's very thin right now, and it's going to be right on the toe of the boot of Louisiana. That's going to continue up to the north and the northeast, and as this whole system does move over to the east, that will continue to make its way over to our westernmost counties, and I'll show you that on future view here in just 1 second. So storms again this evening, and then the pattern will continue all the way until Friday. There is something to look forward to as we get into the weekend, but obviously 4 days to go through in between now and all the way into your Saturday. But Saturday and Sunday are looking good for any outdoor plans. We are seeing a little bit of change maybe towards the end of the weekend, but only minuscule rain chances at that. It's nothing that is going to be like the past couple of weekends in terms of scattered rain and the potential for some storms in nature. So here's a glimpse of those cloudy skies I was referring to. This is the Georgia National Fairgrounds. Looks like a lot of the pathways and the driveways here at the Georgia National Fairgrounds have dried up a little bit, but still seeing some puddles on the ground. So we have some standing water out there. A lot of areas didn't get too much rain over the past 24 hours, but it does continue to add to the rainfall totals from previous days. And some areas actually did get locally heavy amounts, maybe close to 3 or 4 inches. So that water is going to be a lot slower to evaporate. Be careful through any standing bodies of water that you have to drive through, especially at high speeds. When you drive through a good puddle of water at a high speed, that does increase the chance of hydroplaning in nature. So take it a little bit slower on the roads today, any day for the rest of the work week that is trending a little bit wet on the ground. Here's a look at our current temperatures. Like I was saying, a little bit warmer down towards the south. And this is a combination of two factors. Number one, we had some clearing in the cloud cover farther down to the south, so they got some peaks of sunshine. That's why you see some 78s and some 79s down there in areas like Rochelle and McRae. But you'll also notice some cooler air up to the north and the northeast here, and that's actually going to be courtesy something we haven't talked about in quite a while, the wedge. So that cold air damming, where that cold air is going to continue to filter down from the Appalachian Mountains, and it mainly has impacts, I guess you could say, or is mainly known farther up to the northeast of us here in central Georgia. But some of our northern and northeasternmost counties, areas like Jasper, Putnam, Baldwin, Sparta up in Hancock County, they can start to see a little bit of the impacts of those. So that's why their temperatures are still in the 60s here at this hour. And then most of central Georgia hovering somewhere in the mid to upper 70s right now. So we do see a pretty good gradient of colors here. You go from a green gradually into a yellow, then all the way down to a deep orange in our far southern counties right there on our temperature map. That's also where you will find some of the drier air that is present. So areas farther up to the north and the northeast, it doesn't look like you have as suitable of an environment for when these storms do roll through as opposed to the rest of central Georgia. However, you can see that that dark green color does encompass most of our southern 2/3 right now, and we could look at this wedge to kind of erode a little bit. We could see it kind of recede back up to the north and the northeast, but if it does hold strong as these storms come through, maybe not packing quite as much of a punch, and it will help with the weakening trend as it does move through central Georgia. So that's something we'll continue to keep an eye on as well. If you do live up to the north and the northeast, go ahead and just keep your fingers crossed that you are going to hold on to some slightly lower humidity and some slightly lower temperatures, which wouldn't give as much fuel to the fire for this line of storms. But some of these dew point temperatures are into the mid 70s. That is definitely feeling like summer and definitely a noticeable humidity. That's the muggy air that you can wear I've been referring to as of recently. And maybe not necessarily into the low 70s is not as bad as it could be, but it's still definitely very noticeable. And once you get into the mid 70s, that has a lot of repercussions in terms of the higher heat indices as you go into days that are relatively warm into the 90s, maybe even into the mid 90s. We don't have any of that in store for today. However, we do have a very humid environment and a lot of surface moisture available. So take a look at your feels like temperatures. Most everyone feeling true to their actual temperature values, maybe popping up in 80 and actually in 85 in areas like McRae and Unadilla. That's mainly when you get some sunshine, and then that's going to contribute to feels like numbers above your actual temperatures. And it's feeling pretty true to the actual temperatures up there. Another good depiction of that wedge up to the north and the northeast of us. So you will see some pretty gusty winds, not necessarily really gusty compared to what's to come later on this afternoon. However, we do see a noticeable breeze in our northernmost counties. That's a steady breeze of about 5 to 7 miles per hour. And that's also going to be courtesy of the wedge. And then you kind of see the clash of the winds where they start to meet together and they continue out to the northwest right there. So we're getting a bit of northeasterly flow, a bit of southeasterly flow, depending on where you do live, kind of a dividing line of the forecast right now. But taking a look at your surface map, you can see that the stationary boundary that has been sitting here and sitting here and sitting here and been the causing force really and the guide for all of these weather systems as of recent days. You can see a bit of a kink in it right there, so that's showing the wedge kind of pushing that boundary a little bit farther down into the state of Georgia. However, you are seeing these low pressure centers establish themselves and continuing to move up to the north and the northeast. This is going to be the main one that establishes itself right here, just north of Nashville right now. This one over here is just kind of formed out of the blue, not really doing anything. It's probably going to fall apart. And this entire stationary boundary, this portion from Tennessee just to the left side of this low pressure center, all the way back down into Texas, which does stretch into areas of New Mexico too. That's actually going to turn into a cold front eventually in a couple days, and that's going to kind of move through, and that's going to usher in some drier air for your Saturday and Sunday. But like I said, still a ways to go before we get there. Right now, this boundary is just really helping keep this warm and this humid and this moist air mass in place all across the Gulf states. So it does look like areas like Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, including us here in Georgia, are continuing to have this air mass present. And that's why we're continuing to get these systems that form out over to the west in Texas, and they move kind of where it just is more of a suitable environment. That's where it wants to go. That's going to have more ingredients for it to continue to train on as it does move farther to the east. And kind of think of this stationary boundary as the bank of a river. So anything that is on the southern end of this, that's going to be kind of your water flowing downstream like you would see in the Ocmulgee, the Oconee, the Flint. And the stationary boundary acts as a bit of a blocking mechanism, and it will continue to allow that water, i.e. the storms, to move farther over to the east, which would be downstream. Kind of wanted to put it in a little bit of a perspective right there, but still there's plenty of lift along this stationary boundary, and that's what's contributing partially to why these lines of thunderstorms continue to form out to the west and move into central Georgia just about each and every day. So for today, it will be a mostly dry day. We're seeing a mostly dry radar right now. It will remain that way until these storms start to move in late afternoon into the evening. It has constituted a weather impact alert. A high temperature, I bumped it down to 81 degrees. I put it up to the upper 80s earlier this morning, which is a good thing that it is getting bumped down. If we got the temperatures in the upper 80s, then that's going to allow for some warmer air along with some surface heating, a lot more fuel to the fire to allow these storms to continue to intensify. So hopefully we can even keep these temperatures below the 80-degree mark throughout today and stay mostly cloudy until the line of storms does move through. 25-mile-per-hour gusts going to be possible in those local areas that do receive those severe thunderstorms. It's not going to be necessarily widespread. It may eventually end up being widespread, but it's going to be very localized at the moment when that leading edge is moving through your area. And then after that, the winds will get back to a steadier breeze somewhere around 5 to 10 miles per hour, like we are currently seeing on the winds and the wind gust map. Taking a look at your heat index, we may not even get out of feeling like the 70s, which is not a bad thing whatsoever, but it is a very humid upper 70s at that. If we do see temperatures that get above the 80-degree mark, then I imagine some of these heat indices would once again exceed these values that you do see. Something that we don't necessarily really worry about, except, oh, okay, there is moisture in the forecast. We have storms. That's going to be more of the focus, obviously. But the heat index obviously does do a good number for at least telling you how much moisture is available. So our temperatures could hover around what they are right now for the remainder of the day, which wouldn't be a bad thing whatsoever. So let's go over Future View, talk about the latest timing. We did just get a new run of Future View in on the graph model. So this now has the leading edge of this line of storms moving in sometime around 5 p.m. And I've kind of moved the timing up a little bit. I was originally thinking sometime close to 6, maybe even into 7 o'clock. Then the past run that it did had, it was more like 3 or 4 in the afternoon, and I wasn't too sure if I was buying that because this model was making a little bit farther progress than what is currently on the satellite and radar picture. So I was thinking around 5 to 6 is probably going to be the window for that, and this latest model run does reciprocate that thought. So the heaviest band of rain, the gustiest winds, where your hail, where your potential for spin-up tornadoes is going to be, that's all going to be on this leading edge right here, moving into our westernmost counties sometime around the 5 o'clock hour. I know, unfortunate timing, because many of you will probably be making your evening commute home from work around this time. However, just wait for this leading edge to get through your area, wait it out indoors for about 30 to 45 extra minutes. At the very most, it may even be shorter than that depending on how fast the system moves through. And then once things do get a lot steadier after that main leading edge right there at the front, Then things get steadier. It's going to be good enough to drive home. Just be sure if there are any fallen trees or anything on the roads that you make sure you turn around and you don't do that. You find a detour on the way home. We take it hour by hour. Here's 6 p.m. making pretty fast progress. Already past Macon, past Warner Robins, past Fort Valley, past Roberta, all these areas in our western half. And we will continue to see that leading edge push farther over to our eastern counties. Now the graph model does hint at these counties that I was talking about in the wedge are still going to see some of those severe weather implications, even maybe a rate of very heavy rainfall right there if we go exactly according to Future View. Don't get too locked in on that pink color in our northernmost counties. Not too sure if that's going to pan out, but I wouldn't doubt that that pink color is seen farther down to the south of this line because the wedge won't necessarily be too present. We can still see these northeasterly winds right here, so hopefully this isn't going to have as much to work with as it moves through our north and our northeastern counties. However, Future View doesn't seem to go with the consensus that it matters too much. We go all the way to 7 p.m. Areas like Dublin moving over into Washington County, just past Milledgeville, Sparta, somewhere up in the Lake Oconee, Lake Sinclair, the Eatonton areas, and then down into Eastman, other areas in our south and our southeastern counties, it will begin to push towards. And then that leading edge finally looks to move out sometime around 8 p.m. I've gone with 9 p.m. as the end of the weather impact alert just to cover any slight fluctuations in that timing. Like I said, the timing of Future View continues to change. However, I do think we have a pretty good window of about 4 or 5 hours that it's going to take for this line to move through from our westernmost counties all the way over to our easternmost counties. And then eventually after it gets out of here by about 9 p.m., we are good to go for the rest of the night. We may see some more rain try to pop up during the overnight hours. Don't think it's going to be anything in the way of thunderstorms. And then we'll go through Wednesday and Thursday really quickly. We'll talk about Wednesday morning. Still looks to be mostly dry. We could still see some scattered showers, some scattered sprinkles, scattered drizzles. Going to be mainly of the light and steady nature, just like they were this morning after the main cluster of rain moved off to the east. Then we go into Wednesday afternoon. That's when we'll get some sunshine. That's when we're going to continue to see some scattered showers pop up into the picture. But that's a lot more reminiscent of our typical summertime pattern. Pretty scattered in nature, not an organized line moving through like what we have in store for this afternoon and evening. And it could be fairly short-lived. Once we get closer and closer to sunset, that rain starts to weaken and eventually starts to fizzle out. We go into Thursday morning where rain chances and storm chances will still be in the picture. As you can see, going into that warmest part of the day, continuing to see maybe some other type of wave move through. Pretty widespread, a couple of thunderstorms embedded within that, and then we dry out Thursday night all the way into early Friday morning. And then I think Friday is going to be the last day of rain, hopefully, for this week. We will eventually see a front drive through later on Friday, and that's going to have a lot of lift ahead of it, of course. And after we get through the widespread rain on Friday afternoon into the evening, then we should be good to go into your weekend for your Saturday and your Sunday. So taking a look at your day one storm outlook, this is one change that we've seen as of the past 2.5 hours. This got updated around 8 a.m. this morning. Now all of central Georgia is included in a level 2 out of 5 risk. We saw basically our western 2/3 included in this. That was the upgrade that we saw yesterday afternoon. And that's the main thing that drove our weather impact alert, because this is a little bit different than your run-of-the-mill thunderstorms that we have been seeing. So now this level 2 threat does exist even farther east out of central Georgia, which does basically essentially mean that we have greater confidence that this line is going to hold its structure all the way through central Georgia. Because it is trending a little bit earlier, it should start to get out of here just past sunset. So it is going to kind of roll through during the heat of the day, I guess you could say. Not going to be terribly warm today, but when temperatures are going to be a lot warmer than these overnight and early morning hours, when the temperatures have been cooling down somewhere into the 70s, getting into the 60s. Temperatures will still be near 80 degrees, maybe even a little bit warmer than that in some areas. So that's why we do have greater confidence that it will hold its structure. It will still have impacts farther over in our eastern edge of counties. That's all this upgrade essentially means. So it just means that everyone that was in a level 1 threat, I mean, I was going ahead and saying this morning that no matter what level you're in, if you're in a level 1 or a level 2, you're still in an outlook and you still have the potential for seeing severe weather, whether we are going to see that weakening trend or not. But it does look like that weakening trend is going to happen farther over to the east as this line makes its way over towards South Carolina. Once again, the main potential threats, damaging winds and some small, maybe moderate, maybe even large hail in size. Now we go to your day 2 outlook. This is for tomorrow. All of central Georgia and a level 1 risk. So this would mark the 5th day in a row with some sort of severe weather risk. Same potential threats, really. Gusty winds and small hail. But not only for Wednesday, Thursday, we find ourselves for the 6th day in a row with some sort of storm outlook for central Georgia. It's not for the entirety of us. However, I could see this fluctuate over the course of the next 2 days as we do get closer. It does look like a line from kind of Thomaston over to Macon, over through Irwinton, maybe just south of Sandersville and areas farther down to the south. So really Macon southward is where we're looking at that risk for your day 3 outlook for just seeing a strong or severe storm once again. And once we get to Friday, I imagine it's probably going to make it about 6-7 days in a row where we are going to be in these severe weather outlooks, and then we can finally put it into it for your Saturday. Talking about the wind gusts, you will see those wind gusts have a little bit of red color in them as you go into this afternoon into the evening hours. Take a look at this. Macon popping up a wind gust maybe up to 50 miles per hour right there. Everyone else somewhere around 10, 16, 23 miles per hour. Nowhere near that 50 mile per hour mark. And that's what's really just going to be present on that leading edge, even bowing out a little bit. So you can get a good indication of a lot of those straight line winds continuing to push a segment of that thunderstorm out a little bit further than the rest of the bunch. But that's where you're going to find your pink colors, your red colors on that leading edge. And then the winds do get a lot less gusty after it does pass through. So let's go ahead and actually take it kind of frame by frame, see if we can get a good glimpse of these readings. 50 miles per hour, 33, 43 in Macon and Cordele, 48 in Dublin, 37 in Dublin, 20 in Vidalia. So not seeing anything necessarily over 60 miles per hour, but obviously this is kind of frame by frame. Obviously in real time we can grab those pixels and we can get a good image of how fast some of those wind gusts are blowing. I definitely imagine we'll probably have our gusts in excess of about 60 miles per hour associated with some of these severe thunderstorm warnings. And that's what we'll notice for your Wednesday and Thursday as well. These clusters, these waves of thunderstorms are where your gusty winds are going to be. Other than that, just a steady breeze. It may be varying in direction. It looks like it's coming in from the south for your Wednesday. And then as we go into Thursday, maybe starting to come in a little bit from the southwest, where you start to see those yellows, those reds, those pinks in color. That's going to be your really gusty winds associated with severe and some strong thunderstorms that are going to be fairly localized. So the humidity day by day, we've seen an uptick in today's humidity, definitely well up into the 70s for those dew point temperatures. And we're still hanging out noticeably humid levels all the way through Friday. But then Friday afternoon, when that front sweeps through, it will finally usher in some slightly drier air via the form of high pressure. High pressure likes to dry us out. And that's where we finally see the downtick in humidity, and we'll finally get those dew points down to a more comfortable range, somewhere in the 50s, kind of what we were treated to this past Saturday. It was sunny, it was warm, however, it didn't feel necessarily too bad because the humidity was not running rampant like it is today. And that noticeable and that nice humidity will hang around, it looks like, as we go into the beginning of next week. So that's why you will see some rain chances for Sunday and Monday. However, they are pretty minuscule because it won't have a lot of surface moisture to work with. So maybe just some scattered sprinkles, some scattered light showers. So here was that front I was talking about for Friday. Going into Friday afternoon right here, a good amount of organization, not only here in central Georgia, but all the way up the east coast of the United States. This is going to be quite a messy system on Friday as it continues its push out of here, but then finally it continues to move up to the northeast. That front pushes off the coast, and then this is basically predominantly a fish storm. However, it does go up into areas of the mid-Atlantic, the upper Appalachian Mountains, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, etc., maybe even making its way up towards Canada. But we will be dry, and that's the only thing that you need to know for your Saturday morning, your Saturday afternoon, before some wraparound rain does try to push back down into our neck of the woods. This is Sunday at 6 p.m. We may see some rain Sunday night into early Monday morning. That's what the long-range models are hinting at right now, but these aren't the best resolution. We will continue to fine-tune that forecast as we get closer, and then hopefully after that, we're still stuck with some dry weather. It will be very warranted after this week and the dreary stretches that we've had to deal with as of recently. So your weather impact alert, obviously you'll see this red box. It doesn't encompass all of Tuesday. However, it will be getting into probably about the last third of the day. So once we get to about 4 or 5 o'clock, that's when you need to start turning your attention to the radar. Take a look at where that line of storms is over to the west in Alabama and when it will be having impacts here. And then once again, high temperature of 81 degrees. I bumped it down, which is not a bad thing whatsoever. We're going to have less heating, slightly less warmer temperatures, and that's going to help contribute to maybe inhibiting this a little bit. Although this system has a lot of steam from what you just saw in future view. So it's going to hold its organization no matter what, but any form of inhibition that we can give it in the form of cooler temperatures, less parameters, we will take that by any means, and hopefully it won't be as severe as it does look right now, but I definitely think we're going to probably see a continuous line of severe thunderstorm warnings along that leading edge. But after that leading edge moves past you, you're looking good to go for the rest of the evening. And then you will see the chances for a shower or a storm have gone down for Wednesday, only about 40%. And that's definitely overestimating it, according to what Future View just said. But like I said, Future View continues to fluctuate. The only reason I'm pretty confident in its timing for the rest of today is because we're so short away. We're only a couple hours away from this actually moving through. And like I said, I did my own kind of guesstimations according to what the radar said, where that rain was initializing on Future View, and kind of the time difference between the two. So I do believe that 5 to 6 p.m. window is going to be when the leading edge starts to move through. 60% and 60% for your Thursday and Friday. Thursday and Friday are still very up in the air. I have a lot more confidence in this rain and storm chance for Friday as opposed to Thursday, even though Thursday is on short range Future View, because the short range models just don't really do a good job of initializing the timing, how intense these waves or these MCSs are as they do make their way through. I do know that Friday is going to be driven by a cold front, and I do know the models initialize that well, and it does look like we are still going to have this warm and humid air mass in place as that front does move through. So I think the organization on Friday is going to be a bit greater, so we could see some greater coverage of rain on Friday as opposed to Thursday when it may be a bit more scattered. Front moves through, and then we finally dry out. How about a nice and sunny icon for your Saturday? And then partly cloudy skies welcoming in the month of June. This 10% I just put on there as of the latest long-range model updates. We could see a couple showers try to push in as we go into Sunday evening, Sunday night. Some of that could continue for Monday morning, but still minuscule rain chances. We won't have a lot of moisture to work with. We'll fine-tune that as we get closer. The main concern is, of course, the next 4 days, because we still have to get through these before we can enjoy a nice weekend ahead. One thing to be very thankful for is, number one, that these temperatures are still hovering below the 90-degree mark, because if we had the humidity that we have in place right now, temperatures somewhere in the mid-90s, we would definitely be feeling well above the 100-degree mark. We're going to hold off on that, it looks like, at least until we get into the month of June. Then we'll see what that first official month of summer has in store for us. But the big focus is your weather impact alert. So when is it going to be? From about 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. I know I said that leading edge was moving in around 5 p.m. I'm giving a little bit of leeway at the beginning and the end of this, just for any last minute fluctuations that we do see. So by the time you are starting to wrap up the workday, wrap up your day, you're going to want to make sure somewhere around 3 or 4 o'clock you're already making plans to head indoors, especially if you live farther over to the west. If you live farther over to the east, you still have a little bit of time. So give or take about an hour or two, according to those times I just gave you, 3 or 4 for our westernmost counties. And then if you live farther over to the east, maybe more so about 5 or 6 p.m. Going all the way until 9 p.m., maybe even 10 p.m., it looks like the heaviest impacts and the severe weather impacts are going to move out by about the 9 p.m. hour. But if this does trail a little bit later, starts to move in around 5 or 6 like we were initially thinking, then this could get pushed back to maybe 10 or 11 p.m. So really just carving out that late afternoon, evening, and early nighttime window is going to be your best bet for this, as we are going to continue to see some fluctuations with the timing until we do get there. But obviously just make sure you have plans to cook dinner inside, make sure that you have plans to just stay indoors, try to stay away from those windows when that heavy band of rain, that leading edge is moving through. And hopefully in about 20 or 30 minutes, the heaviest impacts are already out of your area. The rain is getting a little bit steadier in nature, and everything is good to go for the rest of your evening. Impact, damaging winds and small moderate, large hail, just know we have the potential for hail, but damaging winds is definitely looking like that main impact, especially with the bowing segments I'm seeing on future view, and especially with what that winds and wind gust map did just say, maybe in a 50-mile-per-hour gust up here in Macon. I wouldn't doubt that that's the highest that we see. I do believe that maybe we could see some strong wind gusts that are going to exceed that, because severe thunderstorm warnings, 58+ mile-per-hour winds, and winds are probably going to be the main driver of these severe thunderstorm warnings, as opposed to the small hail. I didn't throw the risk of a brief spin-up tornado on there because it is relatively low. However, that is something, of course, we will continue to keep you updated on during the actual event. What you need to do is go ahead, number one, make sure you have a way to receive those possible alerts. That's going to be crucial. Obviously, if you don't catch our Facebook page, you don't catch your TV, your phone doesn't notify you, you're going to want to make sure that you have those code red alerts on, whatever it is in your settings, in order to get any severe thunderstorm warnings that you may be within that polygon. But also continue to tune in with us on 13 WMAZ on air, on stream, wherever we are going to be. Just given the timing of this, it does look like all of these warnings are probably going to pop up during the 5 and the 6 p.m. shows later on this evening. However, after that, if we do continue to have warnings, and we will be on the stream, we will be on Facebook, we will be on all of our other platforms that we typically are on. Stay up to date for the changes. I think now we have a really good idea of at least the time window. The impacts have virtually remained the same, but it's really that time window that we have been looking at, and we're going to continue to monitor it over to the west. If it does kick into gear and starts to move in a little bit faster, then we will be letting you know throughout the rest of the day. But staying up to date for changes is always a good thing, because it is weather. It changes virtually every second, every minute, and that's why we continue to usher in that fact, because we continue to give you the latest data. We present all that data to you, and just as soon as we give it to you, it could very well change in the snap of a fingers. So stay up to date throughout the rest of this late afternoon, evening, and nighttime period. It does look like it'll move out of here before the midnight hour, so hopefully you can finally get a good night's rest, not get awoken by a rumble of thunder or two. And then we'll tackle Wednesday, then we'll tackle Thursday, and then we will tackle Friday, and then we will all enjoy Saturday and Sunday, which look to be relatively dry. So that's where things currently stand. Thanks for tuning in here to your extended forecast. I'll be coming up here in about an hour for midday here on 13 WMAZ. Ansley Parker will be in this evening. We'll be kind of coordinating what you need to know, and in terms of the coverage, you can find it all on 13 WMAZ. You want a live look at the radar, you don't have a radar app on your phone, we have you covered. 13 WMAZ Plus, we have a live Doppler radar stream of everything going on here in central Georgia, out over to our west, what the models say, what our temperatures are, everything that you need to know ahead of this line of severe storms getting ready to roll through here in the next couple of hours. So continue to stay updated, utilize the tools that we have for you on the Plus app online, whether that is going to be our website, whether that's going to be digitally. But until then, we are going to continue to keep a very close eye on this, and it does look like it's going to be a bit of a messy late afternoon and evening window. So make plans to go ahead and just be indoors when those heaviest impacts roll through, and then after that, we will be smooth sailing all the way until we tackle tomorrow. So thanks for tuning in, and we will see you here at 10:30 sharp once again tomorrow.